How can I use technology to improve my business operations? For a lot of business owners, you might be serving technology instead of technology serving you, and it's bleeding you of cash. Every app you add to the business might be creating more chaos, and in part because we might have skipped the universal language. By the end of this video, you're going to have a simple 4-step process to make technology give you freedom rather than enslavement. I want to start out with a myth, and the myth is this, is that technology is going to make everything easier. I want to ask you a question. As you go back, there was a great book written just a couple years ago that actually diagnosed what life looked like. So if you go back and think through our technological history of recent, you think about the personal computer that came in the 70s, 80s, and really got ubiquitous in the 90s. And then in the 2000s, we started to see the computer go into our pocket. And so now we had all of this computing technology that was in our pocket around 2007. But then in 2012, this is what all converged. You had mobility, you had the phone in your pocket. You now had a front-facing camera, the ability to do selfies. And Facebook bought Instagram, the ability to essentially put our platform all over the world in a snippet kind of way. And so we became a little self-centered once all of that put together. Not only that, but you had unlimited data that you could go from your phone. So there's a lot there. So let me ask you a question. Has all of that benefit created more clarity and freedom for you? I would argue that I can even speak for me, probably not. I actually feel a little bit more hinged and tethered to these things that are out there rather than free and efficient and having more time and space, right? Do we have more time for things that could matter most? Yeah, we do. But you know what we do is we tend to backfill it with things that are not helpful overall. So I want us to talk about how we can actually use technology to benefit us, to benefit our business operations, and to see if we can be liberated from chaos to make time for what matters most. Now, here's one of the other reasons that I think that technology has really begun to tether us and sort of drill us down, is in part because every app that you bring in has its own language. It's like you're learning a new language for every app or every piece of software that you integrate both into your life and into your business operations. So when we think about these languages, I want to go back in 2015, I'm going to take you way back, kind of show you my age a little bit. I got started and we started the Business on Purpose podcast. And the guy told me, hey, you need to start a podcast. I'm like, what's a podcast? So he told me, and I was like, okay, I'll start a podcast and I'll just start talking about business ownerships and business owners and that sort of thing. So we started a podcast. Well, then I started to go to these podcast meetups and I was in podcast masterminds. I was learning about all these different people doing podcasts. And what I realized was there were a lot of people doing podcasts that weren't really doing much to generate any connection, but they were obsessed about the technology. So really it was more about the technology of podcasting than it was the engagement of people around podcasting. So it's another question that I want to ask you and I'll ask myself. So are we integrating technology in so that we can serve it, or are we integrating technology so it can serve us and liberate us from the chaos that we feel by having all of these different technologies there? All right, so let's go back to the core question. How can I leverage technology to enhance my business operations? There's 4 things that I want to lean in on that I think will be really, really helpful. Number 1, it's when we talk about the language and we're looking at this idea and asking the question, what? What are we going to do to help create some clarity, bring some integration into this so it makes it simple for us? Well, the first thing I want to encourage you to do is go back to what I call the universal language of technology, and that is the language of the spreadsheet. Right? And so I've got a t-shirt, it says spreadsheets change lives. I've got another shirt, it's a little vulgar, it says he's a freak in the sheets. And it's an Excel logo, so don't freak out by that. You can put a comment in below if you're offended, or if you like it, whatever, that's fine. Let's have some fun with it. So the first thing we need to do to start integrating this is we want to actually start with spreadsheets. Because if we can start with spreadsheets, now here's what we're learning. We're learning the universal language of taking data and putting it into a database so that we can see the vertical, the horizontal, and how this all works. Because guess what every piece of software is built on? A spreadsheet. It's all fundamentally a front-facing user interface for the back end of what is a spreadsheet or a glorified spreadsheet. So if you can start here, what we begin to do is we begin to build the muscle. We start to do the flexing. We build the habits of understanding how the back end of a piece of software works without having to lean into code and all that other stuff that frankly you don't need to bother yourself with, especially now. We're seeing so much more automated coding that's out there, you really don't have to understand the language. But what we do need to understand is where this data sits, and also we need to understand how we build a habit around leveraging that data. So if you can take a core process within your business and instead of trying to solve it with a piece of software and an integrated app, let's just start with a spreadsheet. Let's go columns and rows and just start building these things, and that'll start to answer the what of how we integrate these third-party apps into what we're doing. So now I want to ask, how can you use technology? And so if we answer the what, then let's move to the how and start to understand this a little bit better. Now, I'm going to give you an acronym. It's called the MPR. Super simple. We're going to take our 4 core systems of every business: marketing, sales, operations, administration, and we're going to create a vertical on a sheet of paper, just like this. And then underneath each one, we're going to start putting the different processes there. Now you're like, well, I feel like I've seen another one of your videos and you've kind of talked about this a little bit. This is where I think it'll be helpful. If we come back and look at the full operating system of a business, this is how a business operates. The MPR that I told you about, that process roadmap, it fits right here. It's basically what takes your marketing process, your sales, your ops, and your admin process, puts it all on one sheet of paper, so that we understand we can, wait a second, we can use that spreadsheet to put those vertical columns in, and we can start adding those processes. So the what is the spreadsheet, the how is the process roadmap. To be able to get all that stuff that's stuck in your head right now, you know, how to pull a permit and all those small little things, we can get it out on a sheet of paper, and you know what that does? It empowers other people to be able to do the work. Now, in integrating technology, we not only want to go look at the what and the how, but we need to ask the question who. I'm actually going to stay here in our operating system so you can see this play out. I'll get our notes back up and running here just shortly. But when we talk about who, we're going to go to the people vertical. Our 4 foundational cornerstones in every business: purpose, people, process, and profit. And then we got the 4 core systems of every business. But we've got to ask the who's going to use the spreadsheet to map out the processes so that we can both do the function of operations to deliver the product, but also ensure that the macro operations of running the business actually works. So in the who, we're going to come back here to people and go to org charts and job roles. And we're going to ask ourselves, where is this who going to fit within the org chart? But then what is that who going to do? It sounds like a Whoville, right? And so we go back to who is what they're going to do in the job role. Now there's a job role that I want to encourage you to think about. It's what we call a tech stack role. This is one person in the business who their single point of accountability and responsibility, it might be a part-time role, they may do other things in the business, but their single point of accountability and responsibility is to actually make sure that all the technology is both procured and integrated into the business. So if anybody in the business has a problem with online meetings or their calendar integrations or whatever it might be, this is the person who knows how to speak the language, that can talk between everything, be the single point of accountability to make sure it all runs. Not only that, but when you have an idea about new technology, it goes to this person and they run it up the flagpole to see if that's going to be able to properly integrate. Too many of our businesses, we've leveraged technology, but we've kind of duct taped it all together, right? It's just sort of hanging on and hinging on. It's like a 36-year-old car that you picked up at the pound and you're just trying to make the thing run, right? And so that's how it feels in the technology space of our business. But we don't want to do that. Instead, what we want to do is we really want to look at the what spreadsheet, the how, and we're going to map that out through a process roadmap, and then the who, starting to articulate that job role with the tech stack role. Hey, when we're talking about this tech stack role, I have created a video that I think could be really, really helpful for you in not only identifying this role, but also integrating them into the team. So it's how to train new employees. So make sure you go click on that link and watch that video down in the description below. Now, in leveraging technology in business operation, there's a final question we need to ask. So if we go back and look at the what and the how, and then this third one, we asked the who, and so on that we had that tech stack coordinator role. The fourth thing that we're going to look back is we're going to come back and ask what. And so with that map, we're going to be able to map out all these things. So let's say we've got the spreadsheet, we've got a map of the spreadsheet, and we've got the person who can ensure that the spreadsheet actually gets involved and engaged. So the fourth one is the when. So if we're going to come back here and go, okay, we've got the spreadsheet, we're going to map it, we've got the person to do it, but when are we going to do it? You know what your response is? Now. But there's a secondary part of that. It's what we call the RPMs of great leadership: repetition, predictability, and meaning. And so if we can have the tech stack role take the map that you mapped out on the spreadsheet and start to integrate and train with repetition, predictability, and meaning, you don't have to wait 3 months down the road, 6 months, 3 years down the road. You can go ahead and get started now in integrating technology into your business. And once you start to integrate that into your business, we realize that this technology starts to fit within these processes. So when these processes are documented out, the technology process of that is also built into this. So if you go on vacation, the team can still run the process because it's totally documented within the 4 foundational cornerstones and the 4 core systems of every business. Listen, I don't want you to be overwhelmed. I know sometimes when we think about the operations of the business, it can feel a little bit stressful, maybe a little anxiety inducing. A couple things. Number one, I want you to see That's kind of visually what a business looks like mapped out on one sheet of paper. Number two, the good news is that's what we do. And so we've got tons of resources available to you. We've got full-time coaches that their entire role is to sit with business owners like you and help to map all this out, number one, and then to implement it with repetition, predictability, and meaning. My name is Scott Beebe. We work with business owners 3 to 100 employees to build out your 4 core foundational cornerstones so that you can be liberated from chaos to make time for what matters most.